I wanted to wait until the rest of the Fantastic Four dropped on Marvel Rivals before I reviewed all the latest skins, and now's the time. Starting with Captain America, I would say that this is, at this point, my favorite skin of his. It's not really anything revolutionary. It follows the same structure of his default armored looks and really has a lot of the same design and kind of pattern to it, but I do like that it's a little bit more outfitted. I like the bracers, I like the boots, and overall, it's just, I'd say, his most attractive model as well. I've said up until this point that with regard to Iron Man, there's really not much you could do to really make him interesting unless he played with a little bit of the structure, because an Iron Man suit is an Iron Man suit, and I feel like this one is at least giving us some additional features or just decorative elements that push him into something that feels a little bit more formal wear, or something that's close or adjacent to some sort of discernible clothing items. Even though this is a legendary skin for Loki, I personally love the more luxurious kind of designer chic looks that he's had up until this point, and I'm really waiting for the presidential look to see if they can kind of just release it in general or do something a little bit new and fresh with it from the beta. But this is, I think, true to his character. He's mischievous, he's dark, and I feel like this definitely captures that. Very menacing and a little bit more armored and a little bit more demonic, which isn't fully my taste, but it definitely gives him more range in the aesthetics that he can occupy. Star-Lord, I feel like this is such a refreshing look, and I love how they've tailored this aesthetic for each of the characters and a bit of their just kind of nuanced design elements. Not the biggest fan of masks on characters, but this one, I feel like blends a little bit of how his mask typically looks with that kind of cultural inspiration, and just love the overall framework of the outfit. Just the sleevelessness, the big, puffier, well-textured pants, like it just feels very well stylized, and I think that that's a good indication of how the developers handled these character costumes and designs overall. And that extends into Mantis, which I think up until this point we've gotten a nice kind of natural, strong look with her defaults, and then an armored look, which was really cool and gives her a little bit more of that edge. This just gives her a little bit more of that luxury and chic, and I feel like she definitely wears it so well, and love that they played with her hairstyle a little bit too. I feel like that only just enhances a bit more of the sleekness and the grace of the outfit that she's wearing. Overall, pretty simple, but I think that she's kind of a simple slate in general, so I think it works. What I wanted to say with regard to Moon Knight is when I share ideas on certain characters' designs, and this has happened across a few different franchises, people love to say that, well, you need the memorable look of the character because like in game it can get chaotic, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily know that this is Moon Knight. Like if I just kind of came in fresh, you need to be able to like know a little bit of his framework and kind of map and memorize that this belongs to him. So I feel like that kind of throws that argument out the door. I mean, you can easily play with completely transformative aesthetics for characters and just really push them into something completely new. This was a bit of an unexpected look for Bruce Banner, but honestly, I'm kind of here for it. Loving a little bit of the crop action, just with a great punky overall look and vibe. And it still feels kind of chaotic, just with a little bit of that experimental, maybe like toxic serums or elements that are part of his design, which I feel like leads into his transformation as the Hulk. So it just really feels really cohesive conceptually, and I like the play between the purple and the green. I just feel like that's a really great combination for a little bit of an alternative look in general. As much as I love this look for Doctor Strange, it's not completely pushing him out of a bit of the structure and composition that he already has. I've already gushed in my original video on Marvel Rivals about how I just think his looks are naturally and innately very chic and high fashion-esque, and I just feel like this plays with subtle elements and components of it, like certain cuts of the fabrics, just how they're bunched, just to really pay off a little bit of that thematic twist that they're adding. I almost didn't talk about this skin for Human Torch because it's just like, it looks very similar to the default Fantastic Four suit. It's just a little bit more infernal and a little bit more like he's a living comet. So it's kind of like, that's cool. It has a little bit more of like a rockier, darker edge to it. I would love to see them play with like actual flame-oriented garments, like something that just kind of flows off of him like the flames naturally do, but just like in clothing form. Just something to give a little bit more movement and drama in the future. But I mean, this is cool to start. This is the treatment that I want to see Black Widow get more of. I love her just in something that isn't a bodysuit. Like, we get it, she's serving body, we love it, like she's an absolute slay. But this just gives us a new genre of aesthetic and style for her, and it just really suits her well. Still form complementary and form fitting, but just with something that has a little bit more dimension to it, and obviously texture just based on all of the fur. And it's like a cropped little vest jacket situation. Like, give us just some more cute, stylish, playful clothing items to work with. I love this look for the Thing, and this is honestly a type of outfit that I want for the Hulk at some point, because he's shown up in suits in other pieces of the Marvel franchise and different installments and mediums. I just love it. It's simple, but especially for part of like a premiere look, I just think it's great. It's a classic aesthetic. I just think it's fun, especially on bigger build characters, and just kind of nice contrast to a little bit of that tougher Vanguard orientation that he has naturally per his role. I was trying to figure out who Iron Fist reminded me of in this costume, and it's Jamie from Street Fighter 6 specifically, whether I think it's his default or maybe one of his alternatives, and it's really the cropped yellow jacket that's giving that connection. They both have a little bit of that Asian cultural influence to their styles, but this one is already native to Iron Fist. We already know that he is serving style based on his default and his alternative, but this just gives us a little bit more interesting cut in terms of some of the garments. And I love the flared pants. I think that that's my favorite part, a flared pant with a cropped jacket, and then it's just so well decorated. What I love most about this theme and aesthetic for Squirrel Girl is I love when they play with like contrasting color palettes. Like, I thought that they would keep her in more of like a all-American neutral color palette for the most part that seems more core to her style, but this just gives her nice, refreshing, spiritual almost kind of touches and pops of color, which is very nice. And I think that the buns work perfectly for her hairstyle and her character. I just feel like there's a great connection there, but she still has like a nice chunkier boot, nothing too sleek. I feel like it still is plenty feminine and form flattering. Speaking of structures and proportions, very similar thing with Psylocke. Even though that this is a little bit of that new Gothic classical style that she's occupying with like this vampire clan situation, I still feel like it's very congruent to the kind of structure and silhouette of her default look. Really loving the corset belt, the stockings, the garter, just really well stylized and like styled overall, but still feels like it's such a great blend between like a classical European aesthetic with like still a little bit of that Asian influence. I don't know how they managed to do it so well. Warlock is giving me the full Mage class fantasy, pure RPG realness, and this is what I would want my Mage to look like in a classical type like RPG game. It just fits so perfectly, so much gold. Loving the spell book like on the hip. It just feels like I think that's a spell book, at least. Maybe it's not, but it just feels like it makes sense towards a magic oriented character like him. The hood is doing a lot just to make this feel like it's an interesting blend between something imperial, but also something that's a little bit more kind of down to earth, mysterious, arcane. It's amazing what a little bit of upper body coverage and clothing and wear can do to transform a look for someone like Namor. It still feels a little bodysuitish, like Save the Day. It's not like technically an outfit, but it kind of could be if it didn't have all those extra like hardware elements, but those hardware elements are doing a lot of hard work here. Wolverine is serving the full Van Helsing situation here, and I think it's honestly rather fitting, not only kind of like body structure wise, but just overall composition of the outfit. It's an easy stylish look. Like, you can't go wrong. Like, we already know what a bit of this kind of uniform is for this character, just based off of how he's been depicted in a number of different series before Marvel Rivals. But just the scarf, the belts, the arm bracers, like, just so, once again, so well accessorized and stylized. They are making Magick our complete punk queen, eat your heart out. I love this. It's the hairstyle. The hairstyle is like doing so much here. It just feels a little bit more playful and youthful for a character like her. And there's also just an interesting futuristic twist to this that I think easily elevates the punk aesthetic into something a little bit new, neo-punk almost. Completely love that. And I love when they just, you don't have to do too much to fill in the legs. Like, just give me a little bit of something to fill that in, and then we are just completely absorbed by all the great detail in the upper body. So I mean, they know what they're doing on this team. It's skins like this where I feel completely validated, because I even featured an image of Magneto looking like this in my original video for some future skins that he could have or that he could occupy. Like, I know what I'm talking about. Like, this feels native to how he's appeared in the comics, as a few of these previous skins have already. But like, we don't need the full armored headwear situation, even if he's a Vanguard. Like, we get it. Give us something more fashion. Give us something that really positions him as that high class, chic gentleman. And that's exactly what this is doing. Like, I just loved when I saw this. Like, he looks so good, so imperial, and a pure authority. Honestly, Scarlet Witch is naturally a high fashion queen. You don't need to do too much with her. Play around with a little bit of how her dress falls, maybe some of the draping, maybe just some of the cuts and silhouettes, but ultimately put her in this fire red situation and she is gonna rock it. And I love that they gave her, like, they keep giving her this deeper skin tone. Like, it's so refreshing and great, especially with the darker hair color. She looks like Latina, Middle Eastern. Like, it just is such a nice aesthetic for her, and just a nice splash of gold, and delicate too, just to really highlight that femininity. And she just looks so good. This whole Vampire Clan look is just so this could be like literally a genuine runway collection at this point. And what a great aesthetic for Winter Soldier. Like, I'm glad that they gave him full Slay the Day potential. He was already kind of maybe teetering on the edge a little bit with his latest like alternative, but this one pushes it all the way. Just the jacket, the scarf, and it's a tucked in shirt with the belt. Like, it's just so well put together, so tight, so polished. And I love that they gave him more of an older gentleman zaddy aesthetic. Can we reminisce on the drama that was contrived over this Mrs. Fantastic Malice skin? Like, get real. I mean, I've said before how I'm not the biggest fan of like just panty looks or something too skimpy like that, more so because it's lazy or if it's just like blatant fan service. But knowing that this is based off of a look in the comics, it's just like, get serious. I do like that they at least gave her some stockings that cover more of the leg, so there's balance there, even if there is a nice little peek of the belly button for just for a little extra body confidence. Overall, it's not my favorite. I just think it's ugly in general. Like, I'm not gonna front, but I do like the level of accessorizing and detail that's been put in it. Much prefer something elegant and gala like this. I believe that this is like a wedding look or some sort of like formal look from the comics. But I was like, who does she remind me of? She reminds me of Odette from Mobile Legends. If you know, you know. It's giving Swan Lake, which I think is a really interesting look, but I feel like definitely highlights a little bit more of her strategist oriented role. And it just is very fitting. I love the heels or the shoes just for a little pop of gold. Overall, just really delicate and feminine. And I think that, especially in contrast to the Malice, this is a really refreshing look. And Mr. Fantastic is obviously looking so good. I like his goofier kind of persona and orientation in his default look, but this one just really highlights the full distinguished level that he can elevate to. And it's a full suited look that I wish a lot more of the other characters had within their alternates. I've said this in previous videos before. Like, it doesn't matter if they're a fighter or something like that. They can still look chic and polished like this. This is exactly what I want. But what's interesting about this one is I'm getting more Professor Xavier, because especially in one of the latest Hellfire Gala looks that Professor X had, he almost looks exactly like this, just with more like fabric or like draping around him, just to give him a little bit more silhouette and kind of dramatic effect. But between like the headgear and like even just the suit itself, it's very much Professor Xavier. But you know our pop girly Luna Snow stays on top. Like, it still is kind of similar framework of, I think, her default a little bit, maybe at least with like the crop jacket, but it's so cyberpunk virtual influencer pop girly. Like, I absolutely love it. And she looks so good in a like purplish palette with enough of those kind of neon bluish and green hues just to really complement it and give her a full spectrum of cybernetic, futuristic, like musical note, Seraphine-esque style. All right, that's the latest on the Marvel Rivals skins from my POV. I'll probably revisit this in a couple months as they release more skins, and I'm hoping that they keep this pace up because they are serving the looks. Looking forward to getting into more in the future, but until the next video, I'll talk to you later.